Okay. Call the meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, it is. Let's do this.
Follow them down.
Are there any comments and statements from the public before we get started? No, seeing none. On to the informational agenda. Michael Cliff, are you here? There you are. Our student rep at the high school. So what have you got new to tell us? Go ahead.
We began by discussing fundraisers, which there weren't too many new ones, and we passed the Harlem Wizards for freshmen fundraiser we've had here for the past 2 years, and it's been marginally successful. We also came up with flyers for the sports and club performances that we are trying to get at the Spirit Rally that we have in December. We made an outline for them, and we'll be passing them out to clubs as soon as we get everything approved. The majority of the meeting was spent working on ideas for Spirit Week, the week before the Spirit Rally, and ideas that we came up with, some were things like Crazy Hair Day, Role Model Day, Superhero Day, things like that. And we passed several of them on council, such as Role Model Day and a Dr. Seuss Day.
Cute.
And we also have our backups in case any of those get shot down. After that, we discussed a school store, which during the previous meeting, we formed a committee in order to get running and to try to plan out so the school store can be more successful than it has been in years past. And we discussed the suggestion box that we have here in the media center, and how we have a meeting with Mr. Donovan and Heidi Owen, who we're considering buying supplies for the school store from. And we had several other things that we were going to discuss, such as DJs for homecoming, but since we had certain members missing, we were unable to discuss them. So that's all we have.
How's the response been from the clubs and organizations for participating and putting little skits together?
From some of the students that I've talked to personally, some of them would be all for it, like the kids in drama club, since performing is their thing. And although we have run into some difficulty trying to get people from, say, the art club to be able to participate, but we don't foresee it to be a big problem. We think we will all for it.
Good. Anybody have any questions for?
Yes.
Go ahead, Mike.
Good, through the chair. I'm interested about your school store. And what I wondered is there some accounting or business courses and or clubs at the high school, and would they be able to interact with that initiative?
Well, we had a college business math class last year, but as far as I know, that class is no longer offered. So currently all business and school stores being run through the committee that we formed in student council, which right now is open to anyone in the school who wants to help out. And we're also working very closely with Mr. Donovan to get it up and running.
Great. Well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
I'll be one of your first customers.
Any other questions? No? Comments? Thank you. Very nice. Is Karen here? Is Karen doing it?
She might be running a little late, so.
Okay. All right. So the representative for the Education Foundation is not here yet, so we will move to the monthly enrollment update.
Okay, so we took a look at September to September, 1 year to the next. We're taking a look at a substantial decrease in the number of students going to our schools this year. The Macomber went up by about 5 students. This was kind of the tracking that we were doing early in the spring in terms of that kindergarten class. It kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I think it's about 156 right now. So We had quite a few at the lower end, but as we went through the schools, we did lose quite a few students. The elementary school lost about 35 students, the middle school lost about 64, and the high school lost about 50. Now, some of that has to deal with the kids going from one level to the next and how many you lose at the other end. But this is quite a few that have been lost. So if you take a look at the last part of that report, which is the number of students going to other schools. So when you take a look at the VOTEC, it's one of the highest we've ever had, one of the highest years. Partly when the VOTEC schools have additional slots, they're allowed to allow students from the participating districts to send more students there. We've had over the years many students wanting to get to the VOTEC schools, limited number of slots, but apparently some of the other districts are not sending as many, so they were able to take more of our students. So it went from 116 last year to 133. I know quite a few of them ended up going to Bristol Aggie, which over the years we've always had parents that want to send their kids there and haven't been able to get in the past. So for some reason in the last couple of years they've had more slots open for us. So you see a little an increase there. If you take also a look at the private schools, even though it's not as high as it's ever been, it did go up one year to the next. So in prior years it's been as high as 450s, and we're about 384. But last year it was at 553 or so. So again, we've lost about 30 students to private schools. I did ask the principals to, we only had these numbers for a couple of weeks, but at the last administrative meeting, I did ask the principals to try to find out, take a look at last year's, who the kids are, where did they go, if we could find that out. I mean, there is nothing that requires parents to tell us where or why they're sending kids. We just get the slip that says, my kid's been transferred, and we have to send the records. But I was asking them to at least try to get a straw poll of our kids leaving, for what reasons. We always have some kids leaving for, religious reasons and whatnot. So the principals are here if you want to hear some of their stories.
Mr. Larrabee.
Dr. Colley, do we ever, just like an exit interview when you leave a job, do we ever send out a survey to these families to see just exactly what you're doing? If they respond, great, we only get like a 17% back on anything else we send home, but to at least
when I
let them
first
articulate.
came to the district, I did that more on a personal basis. I just got the names and numbers and tried to call a lot of them. That's what I'm saying. Some of this is more of a straw poll type of an approach. And for the most part, those who were going to private schools, it tended to be one of two things. Either my family always sends kids to this school at this grade level, or it was, I want my kids to have a religious type education, and I'm like, I can't compete with those two things. From all the people that I talked to 2 years ago when I first came in, there was, and it was mostly middle school to high school, because at that point when I first came in, that was the question. I only had two families who said, well, I wasn't quite sure, the middle school wasn't the best thing for my kids, so I sent them somewhere else. So those two families didn't have anything to do with history or with the religious nature to it.
I can just follow up real quick.
Go ahead,
I'd be more, I understand the high school thing, that happens everywhere. I'm more concerned with the issues we have at the middle school now, and to have 54, I think it was 54, 64.
Yeah.
Concentrate on those and find out if it was because of the issues at the PCBs that we've lost so many, because that's an odd time. You don't usually elementary school, you're sending a kid parochial.
Yep.
In high school. It's very odd in middle school that you
Well,
decided to
it's
make
one
a
of the
change.
things why I asked the principal, take a look at who you had last year, take a look at the class list, who's missing, call them up, because at least we've had the old phone number. And just try to do some of that.
Mr. Sullivan?
Partially, you've answered the question that we are following up, but when I looked at this packet earlier, there's some baseline information that I was wondering about, and the first was number of school-age children that live in Westport. Is that, if you add all this up, do we have that number here? In other words, we've got listed private parochial school students in first grade. If we add that up to the local enrollment, is that the total number of students that live in Westport? Right, because Department of Elementary, Secondary, Elementary and Secondary
Well,
Education
this
have
is-
that because I think through the census, et cetera.
Yeah, this is,
So what my
well,
question is that's our baseline. I'd like to know not where we lost students, because we have a certain percentage of students that choose not to attend the Westport Community Schools.
Yep.
So I think that's an important starting point, so we need to start with that. Secondly, as we mentioned, there is transfers that take place, and they need the student records. The records are sent from the school to wherever they've gone, so I think we can go back and track based on where we sent records, I assume.
we can. The only thing, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that we would be missing are the students that are in homeschooling, unless they left the state. That they would not appear here, correct?
But don't we have a responsibility, isn't the school department responsible for making sure that students are being educated, whether it be homeschool and we certify that, or know that they're enrolled in a parochial school, or self-paid private school, but don't they need to report that to the town?
That's what I'm saying. When you take a look at the private and parochial schools, that gives you that number. Then you got the ones who go to vocational schools, or still our students. You got the ones that go to us, and then I can add the ones who are in homeschooling situations, because I see all of those, I approve all their plans. I meet with about 90% of the parents that fit that profile. So I do have that information as well that I could add.
What is that number roughly?
It's about 12 families, 15 families?
It's about 12 families.
12 families. A
And
couple of
every-
the families have 3 kids, 2 kids. But that has been fairly consistent. We may have one extra this year that I can think of that was new. One family.
I have one question. I'm actually going to follow up a little bit off of Mike's question. If we have students, if we're not following these students that are pulling out, if we're not, say, getting a good exit poll of where are they going, and we know 10 kids have pulled out, say, and you've got the records for 10 kids, if we really don't have a good grasp on that number, how do we know if students just aren't pulling out and then not reporting back to you saying I'm homeschooling or I'm not home, or they're just not going? And I think that goes back to Mike's question of how many school-age children do we have?
No, if the students go out of our system,
Yep.
we usually find out because we're expecting them to be in our system unless they tell us otherwise. So when they tell us otherwise, that's when we know they're leaving either to go somewhere else in the state or somewhere else to another district or to a parochial or private school within the
Right.
system. Now, the bigger question is if they're moving out of state or if they're moving somewhere else within the state to another district, we don't keep track of that because SIMS does that, the reporting system that the state has. So the only ones we keep track of are the ones that are our kids that end up in a private parochial school that we're sending them to from here. So the other ones we don't keep track of because they're now the responsibility of another district or another state.
But don't we just
If-
follow up on it?
So we should have a good handle on what you're saying, if I understand you, is we do have a good handle already on where these kids are going. So we should be able to get that information.
Right, but we're
to
not
us.
reporting the ones that go to another district here in this sheet or the ones going to another state, is what I'm saying. Those we don't keep track of.
Can we get the numbers for our future meeting as to where all these kids are going? Can
We
we
can do
get a
that.
good number on where they're going? How many kids are homeschooled? And, start exit polling these kids? Yeah, and Jim has a question too.
We can get student, if they came to our system, if they were here last year, and they told us where we have to send the records, yes, we have that.
Okay,
If they are students who live in the town, who show up on the census, that go right to a private school, never step foot in any of our buildings, they are reported by the private school that they go to. We really have no idea where they are.
okay.
So-
That's if they never were in our schools. That's why I'm saying the ones that you see showing here are the ones that were ours who went somewhere else, and we know where they went.
So we'd have to get, to answer Mike's question, we would have to get a census report to find out how many kids we actually have in this town.
Correct.
School age.
Correct.
Is that something that we can have at the same time?
They should
That's how we
match.
make some preliminary
Right.
determinations for kindergarten and pre-K, because
Should
that,
match up.
it's sort
So
of,
can we get that for a future meeting at the same time, so we, just so that we kind of know how many kids we have not even coming here? And maybe judge based on, we know these kids are homeschooled or whatever, because I kind of think that's where Mike was going, and it's a good question.
Well, the homeschoolers I can give you, if there are, part of the issue is we have no way of engaging private schools, and we don't know
Sure.
which private schools the kids may be going to, and we have no way of saying, you need to give us this information.
yeah, they're
Right,
not
I
responsible
understand.
to us. They're
So-
responsible to the state. They
Okay.
have a report to do, just like
Jim
we do.
first.
Okay.
Jim?
I just wanted to know where on here, where does it show up our special education out-of-district placements?
We report them as ours.
So, yeah, okay, local, okay, thank you.
Eric?
I think this is where Mike was going also, and to add a little bit more to it. If we had kids that were from another state, homeschooled, and this is why I think he wants to compare the numbers on the census to what we actually have in our schools. Say two families come from North Carolina, they move in, they homeschooled there, they come here, and they don't report to you. They're going to show up on our census, and so we may have kids that are being actually homeschooled that aren't getting their plans approved through you, because we have no idea that if we're not comparing census to kids in school, then we're going to have, we could maybe have 15 families in town that are homeschooling, and we only know of 12.
Part of the problem is we have no mechanism to get those families to report whether, by law, they have to, but we don't have any mechanisms unless somebody calls us up and says, hey, I see this kid's at home every day, they should be in school, how come? Then we would send the resource officer out there. If they're on a census, we wouldn't know if they're going to a private school because there's no mechanism for us to get the private schools to report to us.
And that's what the census would do, though.
Tony first, remember? Is that right? Tony?
Dr. Collins, do we know how many families simply moved out of town? Maybe they have 3 kids and
We could figure that out from where they transferred to. If they transferred within or out of the state, we can have that because it's one of the reports we
Yeah, we
do.
have a couple different
Screens.
codes. We have
Right.
sort of a code that says moved out of state, went to another public school within the state, which would mean they moved.
Right.
Or went to a private school. Those numbers we can run. Now, we don't report out necessarily what school that they went to. That would take, sort of, go to the file and
That's a
see
hand by
where the
hand.
records were sent.
Right.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, just to clarify, and homeschool was an example, but I'm just looking for that number that we don't have, that baseline, and as the chairman indicated, whether they're homeschooling or, I think we have a percentage of students that have never stepped into a Westport Community School building, so that's the baseline we want to be able to track.
That part's true because you got some kids that go straight to Montessori. From Montessori, they go somewhere else and we never see them.
Sure.
We would
most
never even
kids
know.
aren't on any of these lists.
No.
So
Um,
that's,
How many students did we lose to homeschooling this year? I know there's not a large number to begin with, but I'm just curious.
If I remember, there were 2 new families.
So 2 that pulled out of the schools to homes, 2 families, how many students is that?
I think one had 2, one had 1.
All right.
Which grade, Dr. Collins?
Oh, now you're asking me. Yeah, now you're taxing my ability to remember. I don't remember.
I
But
know
I'll get the
people know.
homeschooling. We'll do
Most
a.
of most of it is lower level, like
Yeah.
elementary.
We'll get you a report. We'll add that to the report the next time.
Okay. Any other questions on this?
We'll get the census. and
I know I saw
homeschooling.
Karen come in. Oh, there she is. So we'll do you next. We skipped you. So we will go back to the Education Foundation presentation. Karen, come on up.
Great.
Yeah, we have
Yeah, it's right here. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you all. I had met with Dr. Colley and Michelle earlier this fall, asking to be added onto the agenda so that you could look at some programs that we are funding for this year and vote to approve on them. However, I was informed earlier this week that it was actually presented on your agenda as a presentation and not for you to actually vote. So I'll do a presentation, and then I have information for you that hopefully will suffice for you to take a vote at your next opportunity. Okay. What I brought with me today is a presentation that we used a couple of weeks ago at our annual meeting. This is our first annual meeting. It's a meeting that we did with our board of directors and also our community council members. If you remember from last year, we were forming a group of people in the community who have good credibility and give us advice, who serve on what we call our community council. So they come to one meeting a year essentially, and they offer some support throughout the year, but they're not on the board and they don't actively work on our programming. So this is a presentation that we delivered for them. In the presentation, I can help you understand the first year of the Education Foundation and our results, and also help you understand what our strategy is for moving forward, and also the programs that we'd like for you to take a look at for 2011-2012. Very excited to tell you that the Education Foundation ended up funding programs that touched over 600 students last year. We were able to fund programs at all 4 of the schools, and these are some photos of the programs that were conducted. As a review, last year, these are the programs that we did, and they covered both programs that we funded and also our own work in bringing volunteers into the schools. For example, Dawn Tripp, who is a local author, came here to the high school and did a writer's workshop for aspiring writers. We didn't have to fund that program per se, but it was work on our part to bring her in and design the program. In terms of highlights of the Foundation's first year, we were very excited to welcome 3 new board members. Last year, we had 1 board member who was not a parent of a child in the Westport Community Schools, and we expanded the board to have 4 board members who did not have children in the community schools and who never had children in the community schools. They are people here in the community who believe in what we're doing. They endorse the mission. They have access and networks in the community that we don't. But it was a really important accomplishment, we felt, on our part to be able to diversify the board beyond just a parents group. Because our message has been from the beginning that if you live in a community, you need to care about the quality of the public education in that community. And so I think that the composition of our board is reflecting that mission. Our community council grew to 11 members, and they helped us in many different ways. They helped organize people for wine and cheese events at home to help fundraise. They introduced us into several different organizations in town. We made presentations to the Westport Business to Business, the Romeos, the Westport Taxpayers Association, and we sought to deliver our message to a diverse group of stakeholders in town. And our community council members helped make those introductions and connections for us. We were also featured on my TV debut, if you don't count these meetings, Claude Ledoux's Westport Matters, the longest running cable TV show in Westport, and he did a feature on us. I'm sure you all saw it. So we also established a web presence with our website and with Facebook, and trying to find other forms of keeping people informed of what we're working on. We received 2 grants last year. We received a $13,000 grant from the Greater Fall River Development Corporation and a grant of about $6,800 from the Helen Ellis Charitable Trust. That grant is actually a reimbursed grant that we'll receive this spring. It's to pay for the production at the middle school, the drama club production. And we also had several appearances in the press. And we're proud of both of these things because it was our way of adding more value into the school system beyond the funds that we were able to raise ourselves directly. In terms of our financial summary, this is a summary of our fiscal year, which ended on June 30. So this is not a snapshot of our current fiscal state. This will help you understand where our funding came from last fiscal year. And we had 3 primary sources of funds. You may be aware that we are the manager of the Lydia Poole Barker Memorial Fund. This is a young woman who's a 2006 graduate of Westport High School who sadly was lost in a car accident earlier this year. And her family approached the school to start a memorial fund in her name, and so we're very honored to manage that for them. It raised over $10,000 last year. It's actually up over $18,000 now. Those funds are earmarked for the Westport High School Art Department. Ms. Barker was an art student here and went on to achieve a college degree in art. And so those funds have not been spent yet, but they are earmarked for that purpose only. We did receive individual and business contributions of $23,765 and our grant from the Greater Fall River Development of $13,000. That gave us a total direct public support of over $47,000, and then our expenses, we spent over $8,000 on grants funded. Our operating expenses were just under $1,600, which we were very proud of to be able to operate so efficiently, so that most of our money went really directly to benefit the students. And that left us with net cash available of $37,156. That number is a bit deceiving because remember the Lydia Poole Barker Fund is earmarked just for the Westport High School Art Department, and the Greater Fall River Development Corporation was a grant to be spent this year on programs. And so we do not have $37,000 of cash sitting and waiting in the bank, unfortunately. But we are just starting our 2nd annual fundraising appeal process, so we're hoping to have more funds available. If you look at the way that we spent our grant awards last year, most of our funds were awarded to the art and music category, 24% to science, technology, engineering, and math, and 8% to English language arts. We actually see that as an area of development for us this year. We'd like to see the STEM category grow in particular. We think these are all important, but we'd like to be able to shore up resources in that area in particular. In terms of our strategic direction for moving forward, we think about our strategy in 3 different pieces. One is our program grants. This is the fundraising that we do and the grants that we award when teachers apply to us for those things. The second is to build our efforts around volunteerism in the community. So the Dawn Trip Writers Workshop last year was a huge success. And it was also really nice for her to be connected. I believe her children are in private schools, just to link into your previous conversation. So for her to be connected and with our community public schools as well. And there is a wealth of talent in this town. There just hasn't before been a bridge to help facilitate or connect that talent into the schools. And of course, people working within the school department are very stretched to be able to spend time to reach out to those people. And so we see this as a way that the foundation can really add a lot of value. And the third thing is that we'd like to take on some more long-term strategic initiatives, things that are going to take time to see results with, perhaps need more funding. And we have an idea in mind that I haven't vetted yet with the folks at the high school, but I can talk to you a little bit about what led to it here today and come back once it's shaped and formed a little bit more. In terms of our 2011-2012 programs, as you can see, this list is much more extensive than our list was last year. It includes all of the things that we funded last year. We haven't received applications for those things yet, and so I'll be back to get your approval for them, but we fully intend to fund them. We didn't want teachers to spend time investing in developing a program and then have the funding only be available for 1 year. And also, students have an expectation that something is going to be there when they've had an opportunity to participate in it the prior year. As far as what the growth of the programs here, many of these programs, 10 of them to be exact, are being funded by that grant we received from the Greater Fall River Development Corporation. And then there are 2 additional programs that we have approved, which is a science fair club at the middle school and a robotics program at the middle school. The second leg of our strategy is to build volunteerism in the community. And so we have already, the news about Dawn Tripp's work here spread quite a bit when it first happened, and she's already put us into contact with some people who became interested in adding value in the same way as well. So we have already a list of people who are interested in coming and helping, and most of these efforts I think would be focused on the high school. And something that we're working on right now is helping to support the middle school with their career day coming up in mid-December. So we've been able to assemble a really interesting group of people from the community who are willing to go and talk about their careers and work with the kids as part of that day. We also have people who are interested in being career mentors. So, someone approached me who is an underwriter in Providence, and she said, not that there are many high school students who aspire to do even what I do for a living, but just people who are willing to be there for kids who have questions about different careers, just need somebody to call to understand a little bit more about what that would be like. Spoke to a parent recently of a junior who's interested in being a psychologist. But she's interested in that because she likes her psychology class, and she doesn't actually have a sense of what her different options are in psychology and what is it like to get up every day and go to work and do that all day. And so we're right now connecting her with a couple of people who are in different kinds of psychology to help give her the resources to ask those questions. To talk to you just a little bit about the long-term initiative that we have in mind, part of the grant that we received from the Greater Fall River Development Corporation was funding to support high school students here in SAT preparation. And so something that we're going to be offering out to juniors is if they would like the resources, if they will use the resources, we will link them up with resources, for example, from the College Board, the online resources where they can do a lot of practice tests, because that seems to be one of the primary ways that kids are successful on the SAT, and also any College Board books that might be available. And so we applied for up to $100 per student for juniors who are interested in that. Personally, I knew several of the top students in our high school last year, and I knew them quite well, and I knew that they were applying to some pretty competitive colleges. And I was really excited about that because for a long time I think Westport kids have maybe shied away from those schools or been accepted and not gone for economic reasons. But these were some kids, there were 3 in particular that I knew pretty well, who were going to go if they were accepted. And unfortunately they were not accepted. They were denied from Brown, Vassar, NYU, Columbia, there may be others. And they were really disappointed. And it started us thinking about a way that maybe we could try to support something that would improve our high school students' chances of getting into the more competitive colleges. And so we, of course, one way is that we're a source of funding. So if the high school wanted to pursue more AP classes, more clubs, more activities that would improve their chances, then we're here for you to apply for funding. But another way is to build upon the second leg of our strategy, really, which is the volunteerism piece. And so the way that we set the stage for the people at our annual meeting, and much of this you probably already know, so I'll go through it quickly, just so that they understand why this is important. Because remember, most of the people at this meeting don't have students in our schools and never did. One thing that we showed them is the cost of private schools in the area to help them understand why it's so important to have a public education that's accessible for people, especially in this economy. We also pointed out that for the first time, the U.S. national consumer debt for student loans is higher than credit card. And that is really a scary state for parents to be in. Personally, I have 3 children. If I need to pay for them to go to staying, it's going to cost my family over $100,000. So that's a daunting investment for people to be looking at. We also shared with them the Westport education statistics, the most recent ones that we could take a look at comparing Westport plans to the state. And we also showed them the college plans for the top 10 graduates of Westport as compared to area towns, specifically Dartmouth, Durfee, and Somerset, to help make the case to them that it's important for Westport students to be just as competitive as students of other towns. And I would argue that these towns are comparable to us in per capita income, maybe even lower in some cases. And so we developed that message into a plan, and our next step is to meet with Principal Tutelo, the guidance department here, to get their ideas and how the foundation could be helpful in this area, but to be a resource for students to help try to improve the likelihood that they are accepted into competitive colleges. And one of our ideas is that we could create connections with alumni from these colleges. Alumni, we have lots of alumni of really competitive schools here in Westport, and those alumni can be influential in the admission process. There are, of course, a lot of quantitative pieces that go into college admission, but one of our board members works professionally with enrollment people at colleges, and of course there's also this other qualitative pieces in terms of who makes phone calls, who writes letters, how many kids have they had from this town, and have those kids been successful? Did they graduate? Did they graduate well? And so all of these pieces are things that our students don't necessarily have control over. And so we were trying to think about ways that we could try to help support that process. I mentioned career mentors, SAT preparation resources. We have some people who work in the college financial aid industry who are willing to come and do workshops for parents. One woman even said she'd bring in her computers, and if we could get internet access, she could help people go through the process right there in the room. College tours. I know personally I didn't have parents who went to college, and so I was really on my own very much through the process, and so I would have appreciated someone having a bus that would have taken me around to some different schools to even show me what choices, what alternatives are you thinking about. Here's a public school, here's a private school, here's a really expensive private school, you know. And so that's something that we could probably easily manage and put together. Also, transportation to area college fairs. If we don't have the resources here in Westport to have a big college fair, you know, Tiverton has one, Somerset has one. Help kids be able to get there, know when they are, and provide transportation to be able to get there. So with that, I will ask you for any feedback and questions that you have for me about the foundation. And then I'd also like to talk to you a little bit about the materials that I have for you for the programs that need your approval, which I guess is going to happen at the next meeting.
Any questions? I would actually, oh, go ahead, Tony.
I've known Karen for years, and Karen works tirelessly, and you guys are doing a great job, you know that. And everyone needs to know that. We need more people like Karen.
Thank
In this town. Thank you.
And we do wish we could clone you, I think, a
I would
couple
like to
times
clone
over.
myself
I'm
as
sure.
well.
I know when you would come in and we talked, and one of the things that we did talk about was the college process here at the high school, and the guidance department is just so short-staffed that they just don't have the time to put into some of these things. I know as a parent of a junior, I have been online trying to find what colleges are out there or in universities, pick through the information, and it is so unbelievably overwhelming. And I hardly know where to start. So some of these things would be, I think, a huge asset to the parents, to the students, and to the staff here, to help the kids really dig through the process, because it is a very complicated and confusing process. And it's almost intimidating. It almost makes you want to just throw your hands up and just say, forget it, I'm just going to go to whatever school is closest to me, because it's a very scary process, and you want to make sure you're doing right by your students, by your children. So, I know I would love to see you guys move forward with some of these things to help these kids find the schools that fit them, and maybe be a little bit more competitive, because it is very important, and it's just hard for the resources to get to them. So, I'm really looking forward to what you guys put together with this as you move forward a little bit. Because the high school did sort of, that's where the least amount of stuff went in last year, was to the high school. So, what we can do up here would be huge for those students too. Anything else? Mike?
Thank you.
Hi, Karen, and again, thank you for everything you do for the community in Westport. As the chairman noted, our guidance staff is short. It seems so a lot of your new initiatives are coupled with the activities that go on in our guidance department. I'm a little troubled if we are short-staffed in the guidance department. I know we made some adjustments over the past few years, and if we feel the result of that is a shortage of services, I think it's something we should put on the agenda. The only footnote, not a criticism, but I want to highlight that for a school our size to have 4 students that went on to the University of Massachusetts at Amherst is a gold standard. Those students will have tremendous opportunity, and a public education in Massachusetts is second to very few top-tier Ivy League schools. So it would be nice to see a mix of other schools there. I don't know if that's a couple of things you mentioned, the financial consideration for a family, but UMass Amherst, I believe, is worth noting that it is an achievement for those students that went on there, as well as many schools. But you're right, we don't see the similar schools, although they're a little different size, in similar communities are producing a broader set of graduates. So I think you have a
And I
task
agree with
ahead
your
of you.
statement. I'm a professor at Bristol Community College, so I know that students can be successful within our state system. Our concern is that if a student applies to 4 schools and is only able to go to their 4th choice, that they should have more options available to them. That if they really want to go to Columbia, there should be a shot at it, right? If that's their dream, they went, it's the one that they love, they bought the sweatshirt, they want to go, and then they don't get in. That's disappointing. If they get in and they choose UMass Amherst, and several of those students are in the honors college there, they are getting a fantastic education, no doubt. The concern is why aren't they getting in to the other ones? That was our concern.
Well, it's a good thing to examine. I look forward to the conclusions. Thank you.
Anybody else? Jim?
I just want to echo what everyone else has said. Thank you very much for all the hard work that you and the rest of the group has done. It's very, very impressive. The work that you guys have managed to complete in a year is great, and I urge everyone out there to support the foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
I will give to you now, I'll pass these around. This is a packet of information that lists the programs for this year that we have approved and are ready to fund. There's a description of the program and a cost of the program. Now, in some of these cases, materials costs are not entirely defined yet, and so I've done my best here in trying to help you understand how much they would be. The other thing that I wanted to mention to you is that the foundation uses a technology called Dropbox, and maybe some of you are already familiar with Dropbox, but we have invited you to join a shared Dropbox folder with us. I'm sure you haven't seen my invitation yet because I sent it a couple of hours ago. But my thinking was that when we receive applications from teachers, that I could just put them in the school committee Dropbox, and you would have instant access to understand what it is that people are asking us for. You could give us input then, or it would just be a more efficient and effective way for you to get the information rather than me having to email everything to Karen. She has to print everything out. If you don't want to use the Dropbox technology, that's fine. You have two options with Dropbox. One is you can just log into it via the internet, and you can get to it from any internet location. Or you can also download the application to your hard drive, which means that right on your hard drive, you will always have the most recent files that we put in there. That is why you see a column on this spreadsheet that tells you the name of the file in the Dropbox with all of the information. So if my description of the program isn't adequate for you to be able to ask questions or have the information that you need, I put all the full application and budget up in the Dropbox for you. And I invited all 7 of you to join.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Using the latest of technology. It is an interesting
It's a
piece of
little more
software.
green.
Mr. Sullivan?
You'd be
Just a question on the Dropbox, and perhaps it might be of interest to the fellow members. If we open up the Dropbox, is it similar to a chat room where we discuss amongst ourselves or share information? Because the concern there is the open meeting aspects. I know sometimes our procedural mechanisms here seem to be the old, pen and ink, but sometimes we have to wait before we have cross-discussion on issues. So I just didn't know if that was...
No, it's a good question. There is not a chat feature in the Dropbox. It's
Okay.
just a file sharing mechanism. So it's like the file network at
So we go back and forth with you,
workplace.
perhaps, or...
You would need to email me separately outside
It's
of
just a filing
Dropbox,
cabinet.
right?
Great.
But you would see instantly, rather than having to wait to receive it at a meeting, any paperwork or information. And, when you turn on your computer, you even get a message on the bottom. These files have been updated in your Dropbox, if you wanted to take a look at them. So I thought it might facilitate communication between us.
Information flow is good. That sounds exciting. Thank you.
It's sort of a holding area, basically,
Exactly.
that you
Filing
access
cabinet.
via the internet, so.
Good
I
night
don't-
when you can look at it while you're at the meeting.
Okay, any other questions for Karen? No?
So
Thank you.
Just so I understand, in 2 weeks, you're going to
Yep.
vote on the,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you.
We
Thank
already
you, Karen.
have
It'd be on,
On
I'm
the
just going to
agenda.
take this.
No, we'll need more information than this, because we have a full form for every program, if I come through the chair.
Go ahead.
Our policy is such that we have more information that's on this as we approve individual programs, such as who the sponsor is, what, if we're going away from that, I think
that's,
So 2 things. One is all of the information is in the Dropbox. Secondly, I can come to the next meeting and answer any questions that you have, if that would be helpful, or I can answer them before the next.
Can we download,
well,
can
if I
we,
can just explain what I'm saying.
go ahead.
Thank you. We have a form that has complete information. If all that's going to be in the Dropbox, that's great, but right now we've had a process where if we're accepting a donation from an organization, we have a form that gets filled out. I'm just asking if that's not here, if it's in the Dropbox, great.
it's not necessarily been a form. What we have presented to you in the past has been the actual grant application, which was generated by the foundation, and I'm assuming that's what's in the Dropbox.
And our policy has a longstanding policy that references the form similar to other programs that we accept donations from.
Well, that's my point, and she's saying there is a different way of getting that information to you, or do you want it printed? We can print it.
And if there's a
Right, but
form,
what I'm
haven't
saying, and I
used it
just want to
before, but I
clarify if I
can-
could, the form that we use should be filled out, and that's what I said last year as well. If we can get that form to them, I think that achieves our policy, which is in place, that we have a form that needs to be filled out by our teachers when they are requesting that we accept a program from an outside source of funding.
That's what I'm saying. That's the grant form that gets filled out, that then comes back to us for approval, that they fund.
Our form.
Yeah.
So that's going to be in the Dropbox? That's what my question was.
If you have a form, I'd just love to have it so
Yeah,
that we can
that's-
adapt.
last year we didn't use our form,
We can
that's
adapt
all.
our
Yeah.
application form to be that, because I don't want to ask teachers to do two
That,
forms.
right, exactly. That's the one thing I think we, last year, we had a few situations where the
Well-
standard form, if we can get
If you
it.
need us to fill out that form for all of these, then I would just love to know sooner
Well,
rather than later.
Dr. Colley, look into that, and please let her know ASAP, and we'll include those in the packet that go out to the school committee members so that everybody has an opportunity to look at them. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Middle school update.
It's the same form we used the field trip, everything. It's a form that we got last year, I brought it up. We'll get to it.
As you know, we've been trying to continue to put all the information we have out there in as many ways and forms as we can. This small PowerPoint I used at the latest superintendent's coffee to try to keep people informed as to what's going on. And let me see if I can work this. Basically, start with an overview of where this came from in terms of starting out as an MSBA project to try to get the windows replaced at the middle school, finding the PCBs, then finding the PCBs inside the school in the air, and having to test that and fix it. So we talked about how we opened most of the school at the beginning of September. I do have a little bit of an update for that. Up till yesterday, the office areas were all closed off. If you remember, we tested them once, we tested them again, found out that perhaps the rugs needed to come out. We took the rugs out, replaced them with tile. Actually, we took all the rugs out and replaced them with tile. In the offices, most of the office spaces, when they got redone, and again, this is just very brand new information. I wasn't home last night, so when I finally got home and took a look at it early this morning, I printed it out, and all but one of the office spaces came down below 320. So we basically have pretty much everything open there except the principal's office. Had to be that one. That's about 360. But again, they've come down from the 900, 1800, 600 down below 320. Even the guidance offices, which had no ventilation other than the ventilation that we added to the rooms from the outside, that brought it down to about 320 in the guidance offices. But we're still doing a little bit more work. We have the areas around the back of the media center in the middle school that had the rugs in them, and we had them removed. Right now, they're just finishing the tile. They finished the tiling. Now we're doing the cleaning, the waxing of the floors, and the ventilation. Downstairs in the the fifth grade wing, there was some pieces of rugs in a couple of rooms, and in the hallway, those were removed as well. So again, we still have a little bit of work to do, but and we have one room that we haven't approached yet. We did not get the results back on some additional testing in the the music room, room 24, and we still have not arranged for additional cleaning to be done in that room because we're waiting to see if there's any issues with the paint in that room. We did have one small chip of paint that we tested and had a little bit of PCBs in it. We wanted to test more extensively in the rest of the room to make sure it's not the paint, because the paint's from the 90s. So we're not quite sure why that chip had any in it, other than perhaps, picked it up from the air or from dust. So that room still remains closed, as are the offices behind the media center. And we will re-clean the principal's office and retest when we do the testing in the back of the media center, which should be done probably next week. So slowly, we're opening up the building. However, we wanted to let people know that currently we still have, even though we removed 70,000 square foot of tile and more than 4 miles worth of caulking, there are still some ceiling tiles and glue that remains in some areas which we listed, such as the stairwells, the loading dock, underneath some or inside some of the drop ceilings and over some of the walls that divide classrooms and hallways. They have been encapsulated with paint or with plastic, but they're still there. And there's some PCBs in the windows itself, in the sizing. So according to regulations from the EPA, any source material, meaning materials that have PCBs that were there from the very beginning from construction, need to be removed. So these are things that still remain to be done with the building. So we're not quite done, but I wanted people to know that. We do have some work that remains to be done long term. Right now, what we did was to try to get into the building so we could use the building while we explore long-term options. So we have basically worked at bringing the levels down below the EPA guidelines so that we could occupy the building while we explore what else we should do. We should be able to present the EPA a monitoring plan once we finish these last few rooms. And we should begin to do the quarterly testing. One of the things I want to be able to do is to begin that, so perhaps we can send reports home with the report cards. Even though we go out and we put things on the internet, we do it here at the school committee, we do it at, informational sessions, we do it at coffees. I want to make sure some of these parents who perhaps don't tune in, were so much fun. But those who don't have any other access other than whatever we send home, that perhaps we can include it with the report cards. In terms of the MSBA, because this question keeps coming up again and again and again, the MSBA has basically stated that they are not going to participate in remediation efforts unless they're done in relation to another approved project. The only approved project that we have or have had in the process is the window removal. So perhaps the MSBA would still consider that. There may be other things they consider if we add to those, to the request to the MSBA to do something at the middle school. But I will go out on a limb and say pretty much if the remediations had anything to do with the inside of the building, like the ceiling tiles or caulk inside the building, it had nothing to do with the windows, they probably will not participate in paying for those costs. We did float the idea of, what could we do in a more long-term situation, because knowing that we still had more PCBs to remove, more things to do to the middle school, we asked, and they basically were not really keen on the idea of replacing that building with a new building. We did float some ideas of perhaps, and I'm going to bring them up here, there was one option that I floated to them, which is to return the middle school as a building, or the building of the middle school, to the town for other purposes, including office spaces and for other departments. I even said that we could house perhaps the administrative offices over there, because they do not, they're not part really, the way the MSBA looks at it. Superintendent's offices are not part of the educational facility. Therefore, any space that you take up within a school really is not open for renovation projects or things like that for them to reimburse. So if we do give the building back to the town, we can use it for our own offices. Town could use it for other offices as well. And then we would still need to do some of the remediation work, but because it houses adults now at this point, you don't have to get to the strict guidelines of dealing with the EPA regulations for small children. And then, we still have a ton of work to do as well, including things like ADA issues of compliance, the parking lots, fire and safety issues, and heating and ventilation in that school. Instead, we could go and try to expand the Macomber School and the high school. These are, again, options that are more long-term. It would give us a little bit more room for our programs. It would allow us to perhaps coordinate the middle school grades like 7th and 8th and the high school, maybe address some of the issues of why parents sometimes choose to leave the middle school and then go to other schools other than the high school. If they get more familiar with the physical plant and the people that work in and out of this facility here, if we expand it. At the Macomber, it's one of the few places that has room for expansion. Would be able to house a few more grades, which would give us perhaps some room at the elementary school. The elementary school, even though we're losing students, they're sprinkled throughout the grades, so it's not like you can get rid of wholesale classrooms. And we still have the ever-increasing programs that we keep adding to the schools by regulation and by the needs of the students. So, for example, we're just talking about perhaps the need next year to have an additional self-contained room at the elementary school because some of the kids coming up from the MAC will be coming into our now self-contained room, which is pretty full, and some of the older kids could be split off to another class because, one, you can't have that many kids in the same room, and two, the age span between the ones coming in and the ones that have already been there for a couple of years is going to be fairly great. So we'll need another room, and talking to the principal, we'll also perhaps need another first grade, since the big kindergarten class would now be going to the elementary school, and we'll basically be out of room at the elementary school. So by doing something like this, even though it won't help us next year right away, eventually it may relieve some of the pressure, at least in the elementary school and perhaps across the district as a whole. It would give us the opportunity to have the MSBA help us, not just with the expansion, but perhaps also with the older parts of the building. Here at the high school, we've had issues that we haven't been able to address, mostly because we have not been able to get any funding for them. Things like, as you know, we had the vote go down for the parking lot, the electronics control over in the auditorium that take part of that building with it. Some of the fire and safety issues. If you know, years ago they tried to put in a smoke detector alarm system here. And then all the ADA compliance issues that are in this building. So if we do an expansion, maybe the possibility that you can actually improve the old part of the building while you have the new part of the building being put up, and get the MSBA to participate in all of that effort. The same thing at the Macomber School. So it's one option that we could pursue. The other option that's a little bit more long-term, if you are going to go into the middle school to remove the source materials that remain there, you're going to be taking out windows, doors, perhaps cutting into walls that separate one room from another in order to get at the remaining materials that are up there. You're going to be doing a lot of reconstruction. At that point, my suggestion would be if we keep that building as a school, instead of trying to expand the other two and then figure out what to do with those buildings and their issues, but if we want to keep the middle school as a school, then to do some additional renovation to that school. we have, and I guess we've explained this at other meetings, we have old boilers, old HVAC systems that have no automated control systems, so we can regulate the efficiency of it. We have lockers that are falling with some of them having doors. Some of them, the hinges are broken or hanging off. The doors are hanging off the hinges. We have, there could be some sprucing up of the facility in general. The gym needs a whole new revamp. I know we tried to get at least the padding on the outside of the walls that are all brick with very sharp corners. The locker rooms need a whole refit. And we have some really interesting ADA issues in that building because the way it was designed, most of the entrances don't come into either one level or the other. The opening to go into the building really goes into a set of stairs. One goes up, one goes down, and you have no idea which way to go. So when you go into the front of the school, or what we're calling the front entrance right now, to get to the offices, you have to know to go upstairs, because if you go downstairs, you'll get lost into the hallways for the classrooms. And for somebody who's handicapped or has a handicapping condition, would find that a very difficult thing. They actually have to get back in the car, drive all the way around the back, make sure that the office knows they're coming so somebody can open the back door, so that then somebody can let them onto the elevator so they can come upstairs, so they can go all the way around the building to the front of the building in the second floor to get to the offices. These are some of the issues that building has that we would have to take care of no matter what we do. So again, if we are going to do any more work at the middle school, my suggestion would be, if we're going to keep it as an educational facility, that we then take care of it and bring it up to modern standards, including complying with the ADA regulations. So those are the two main options, since the MSBA has already shot down the idea of a new school. So that's not going to happen, or at least not with their help. And if they help us in any way, shape, or form, similar to the work that they're going to participate with us with the roof here at the high school and the Macomber school, it's about 46%. So if we could get some help in any other work that we do in the district, that would be helpful. So the second solution is to take care of the middle school. Let me give you an idea of costs. Right now, the temporary work that we have done to get the school open and the students in there with the air quality to the place where we can say that the teaching spaces, the educational spaces the kids have been using, and now the cafeteria, lunchrooms, now the offices that are below the EPA thresholds, it's about $3 million. Most of us were there last week on Friday when the Board of Selectmen, the FinCom, and the school committee met together to try to put together a date. And at the time I did this, I didn't have the date yet. So we put a special town meeting for December 6th. So that should be on everybody's calendar, I hope. Because at that meeting, my recommendation was to ask for $3.1 million. $3 million, and I gave you an updated cost sheet. The $3 million is basically to pay for the work that has already been done. The extra .1 or $100,000 is for the study, because every time we get into one of these situations, people want to know. We want to know exactly how much it's going to cost. Now, people need to realize that until you do the work, you never really know how much it's going to cost, but you can do some estimating. The $100,000 would be added to this question that goes onto the warrant article for the special town meeting on December 6th to do the study, to have a design and consulting firm come in and take a look at what is it going to cost, to give us some idea of what the additional cost is going to be to take out all the windows, to remediate the cement and brick around the windows, or the cement and brick around the doors, or the ceiling. or take out the rest of the tile off of the stairwells and above the door, the walls that separate some of the classrooms. To do all that work, how much is it really going to cost? Because we will have to go back to town meetings somewhere, shape, or form to get funding for that work to be done. And I'd rather go into those kind of negotiations with the town and to put in front of the town an actual dollar figure that it's not just coming off of the top of my head. That we've actually had a firm come in, take a look, and estimate what the costs are going to be. So I would also like to present a different article that asks for a study to see how much it would cost to do either option one, which would be to turn the school back to the town and then expand the MAC and the high school, or option B, to take the middle school, not just do the remediation work that still needs to be done, but then to actually upgrade the middle school. So at the special town meeting, we have a $3.1 million request. Right now, the bills for the work are already in hand. We've actually gotten a demand letter from one of the companies because we haven't paid them. I mean, we paid a partial amount of their bills, but they're getting a little leery of having to wait till next year to get paid. So, it would be absolutely necessary for us to pay those bills sooner rather than later. Right now, if we were not able to secure that funding or the ability to go out and borrow to pay these bills by way of that December 6th town meeting, would be devastating to our schools. We run about a $15 million operation. By the time that Christmas rolls around, we will have used half of that just to pay for our operations, mostly payroll. Because of that, that means we'd have about $7 million left. If we used $3 million of that to pay the bills that are in hand, we'd have anywhere between $3 and $4 million to run the rest of the year. And I can tell you, there is no way we can pay payroll with $3-4 million between January and June. Not sure how big the class sizes would get, but definitely 30, 35, 40. I'm not even sure we can fit them in rooms. I'm saying, it's almost shutting down the district. One more thing that I wanted to bring up is the idea that even if we go to town meeting on the 6th and we get the approval from the town, we will be able to pay the bills. They'll do some short borrowing for 10 years. However, once that goes to the bond, the town basically said that would be our cost. So over 10 years, we would have to pay that amount back out of our budget unless we were able to ask for a debt exclusion ballot question, which we can ask in any of the town elections. I was thinking that we asked the town to put it on the April ballot. That way we don't create another expense for the town by asking for a special election. Otherwise, in a couple of years, we'll be looking about $400,000 a year additional funding coming out of our budget in order to pay the bill of principal and interest from here on out for the next 10 years. So we have several questions that I'm looking for the school committee to give me some direction on. We could ask for MSBA to consider both the expansion of the MAC and the high school. We could also ask them to consider, because we can ask them to consider all of them and then pick and choose which one we do, and ask them to consider the renovations of just the middle school. We could ask the town to, fund the $3.1 million. I think we already did that at the Friday meeting, but we could ask them to also consider including that as a ballot question for the spring. The last question that I have is whether we should ask for a feasibility or feasibility cost study for options one, returning the building back to the town and expanding Mac and high school, or B, renovating the middle school. I mean, because we can ask the MSBA to consider these things, but eventually people are going to start asking, how much is that going to cost? Which option is better? And until we do a study, we won't know, and studies don't happen without funding for them. Right now, we don't have that funding, and no other mechanism to fund that study, and that would be perhaps a question for a town meeting, whether it be this special town meeting or whether we wait until the spring town meeting. But I want to prepare the town as to which way we want to go to start exploring the long-term options.
Mr. Larrabee?
Two-part question. Sorry I had to step out there for a moment, so I don't know if you would answer this in the beginning with your MSBA. Would have we been better off never occupying the middle school, putting boards on it, putting a fence around it, and doing other options?
Are you saying from the point of view of the school or the towns?
Both.
Well, from the town point of view, no. Because once you find it, if you were ever going to use the school for anything or the building for anything, you would have to take care of the PCBs. Once it's found, it's found. Would be better if we had never found them, or let me qualify that. Not that it would be better if we had never found it. If we had never found it, we would never be in this situation. But once you find it, you know, do you really want to leave people working or operating in conditions that you know may be harmful? So, you know, whose responsibility is it? It's the town's building, it's a school building. If it becomes a town building, the town should still take care of it. So the only question is, you know, should we have torn it down? I don't think in the amount of time that we had to take a look and figure out what we wanted to do, that we could have torn it down. If you tear it down, the other question is, would the MSBA have allowed us to do that and participate in doing something else? Probably not. Because they want to be in with us from the very beginning in the planning stages. That's why I'm suggesting this study. Because if we go ahead and we put in what's called a statement of interest, to say, hey, let us look at the middle school, here's what we would like to do, let us look at perhaps expanding the MAC and the high school, let's put statement of interest in that. Eventually they're going to say, okay, well, how much is that going to cost?
Because we had an option that was on the table that we had talked about of putting modular classrooms in, and it was $3 million over 3 years. We're at $3 million over 3 months. Huge difference.
Yeah, but you would have still had, and this is that was the point, the town would still have had to deal with the $3 million that it's not. Perhaps it would have been $2.5 million.
30% of staff being laid off. That's what I'm worried about. It's water under the dam, so it really doesn't matter. Second part of the question, the work has only been completed a little over a month ago.
Yes.
7 weeks. I suggest, so we, at least until after town meeting, we stop paying those bills. Honestly, I don't know why we're in such a rush to pay these companies. We're only 30 days out, and I really don't want to be signing any bill warrants that are going to be paying these companies right now until we find out what's going on with this town.
Well, right now the town's holding the bills. So, you know, I think they're already
So
doing
the bill
that.
warrants that we sign on Tuesdays are not paying any of these bills?
A partial payment was made to several of the companies, trying to just put them on. That's when we thought we had a November meeting. So I don't know what the companies will do at that point. You know, usually 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, they begin to either charge interest or perhaps pursue other options. So again, you know, I can tell you what the bills are. If they start charging interest, then add it to the bill, I guess. But, you know, we're going to the town to ask for a specific amount. If that amount increases between now and the time we actually pay the bills because they're charging interest, or we get into lawyers or whatnot, then we're going to have to look for money for that. So I'm trying to avoid, or trying to get these companies to work with us to, hold off, but perhaps get a little bit of money into their bank account so they can pay their payroll, or if they already pay their payroll, to replenish their bank funds. I'm not saying paying them all completely, I know the town doesn't have enough money for that.
Mr. Sullivan?
Certainly, the financial scenarios that you described, A, taking care of a $3 million expense that we've incurred, and then B, going forward with rebuilding buildings is a huge discussion that we are not going to be able to answer this evening in terms of the options of pursuing whether to build a building or even to authorize a study right now, I think is premature in terms of rebuilding. I think we have to take care of our two things. One is our financial house, and that's